Bhute, Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane, Namaste Saraswatam Deve, Gauravani Bacharane, Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskadyade Satarane. Looks like some of us have survived the holidays. I think yesterday was Christmas in Russia and Ukraine, is that right? Ravila? Bechara?
Yeah.
Rust. Yes. Did Santa Claus come? Did Santa Claus, was that Father Frost? The mayor's no.
He was coming only in New Year and December and December 19 coming Saint Nicholas.
Oh, Saint Nicholas. So he came already. He's already. You have to wait till next year. Okay. So for this year, we'll start with Bhagavad Gita chapter 5, Karma Yoga, Action and Krishna Consciousness, text number 7. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane, Namaste Saraswatam Deve, Gauravani Bacharane, Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskadyade Satarane. So text number 7, Yoga Yukta Vishuddhatma, Vijitatma Jitendriya, Sarva Bhutatma Bhutatma, Kauravan Napne Nalipyate. One who works in devotion with a pure soul, controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. Purport. One who is on the path of liberation by Krishna consciousness is very dear to every living being, and every living being is dear to him. This is due to his Krishna consciousness. Such a person cannot think of any living being as separate from Krishna, just as the leaves and branches of a tree are not separate from the tree. He knows very well that by pouring water on the root of the tree, the water will be distributed to all leaves and branches. Or by supplying food to the stomach, the energy is automatically distributed throughout the body. Because one who works in Krishna consciousness is servant to all, he is very dear to everyone. And because everyone is satisfied by his work, he is pure in consciousness. Because he is pure in consciousness, his mind is completely controlled. Because his mind is controlled, his senses are also controlled. Because his mind is always fixed on Krishna, there's no chance of his being deviated from Krishna, nor is there a chance that he will engage his senses in matters other than the service of the Lord. He does not like to hear anything except topics relating to Krishna. He does not like to eat anything which is not offered to Krishna, and he does not wish to go anywhere if Krishna is not involved. Therefore, his senses are controlled. A man of controlled senses cannot be offensive to anyone. And then probably goes over how Arjuna was not actually offensive because he was fighting on Krishna's behalf. And although it appeared that he was killing the soldiers on the opposite party, but actually he was just changing their dresses, that no one actually is killed. So why is one dear to everyone if one is Krishna conscious? Because Krishna is in everyone's heart, and he knows exactly what everyone is thinking, what their desires are, etc. And basically speaking, everyone wants 3 things in life. Everyone wants knowledge of how to become as happy as possible for as long as possible. Everyone is seeking relationships that will bring about happiness. whether with human beings or animals or even inanimate objects. Everyone is looking for relationships that give pleasure. And because Krishna is the reservoir of pleasure, one who's in Krishna consciousness is actually, as Vidura said, or Maharaj Yudhisthira said, when he met Vidura, Bhavan Vidas Bhagavatas Tirtha Bhutak Swayam Vibho Tirtha Korvanti Tirthani Svantak Stena Gatavritaha. That saints like yourself, Maharaj Yudhisthira was telling Maharaj Vidura, are verily holy places of pilgrimage. Because wherever you go, you turn that place into a place of pilgrimage because you carry the Supreme Lord within your heart. In other words, if we want to make people happy, we can do that if we're Krishna conscious. Not only if we're actually conscious of Krishna and feeling the happiness in relation to Krishna, because Krishna is a reservoir of happiness, but also Krishna in our heart will tell us exactly how to act towards others in order to have the best possible relationship with them. Such that we find that exalted devotees, like, well, we can take Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for an example, not only had very close relationships with very dear devotees, but we also see that even amongst the animals, he was very dear. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to the Jharikanda forest, not only the deer, but also the tigers and the elephants, they're all dancing and chanting and rolling in ecstasy. Even the elephants were rolling in ecstasy. And the deer and the tigers were kissing each other due to divine love. So that's quite powerful. We shouldn't imitate Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or even great devotees like Thakur, Saranga Thakur. He would simply crack his whip and people would become Krishna conscious. They develop prema just by hearing Saranga Thakur snap his whip. And there are other devotees who, for instance, one devotee would go into the forest, and due to his ecstatic love for Krishna, he'd find tigers and slap their faces, and the tigers would just purr. Sometimes he put venomous snakes on his lap and play with them. And sometimes he'd stay underwater for 3 days, chanting Hare Krishna. Now, obviously, we could try to imitate such great devotees, but we probably won't be very successful. It'll definitely be a good lesson for our next lifetime, which will come very quickly if we try to imitate such devotees. On the other hand, if we're trying to do our service in Krishna consciousness and have at least a vision how everyone and everything is related to Krishna, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Sarvabhutastam Atmanam, Sarvabhutani Chatmani, Ikshate Yoga Yuktatma, Sarvatra Samadarshanaha, Yomam Pashati Sarvatra, Sarvam Chamayi Pashati, Tasyaham na pranashami, na sachan na pranashati. That the true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized soul sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. And for one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am no loss to him, nor is he ever lost to me. In other words, just to remember that Krishna is in everyone's heart is one way of seeing Krishna. Just like, for instance, in the morning, in places where the sun comes up, here in Slovenia, the sun doesn't come up. I mean, it does come up. So you don't see the sun very often, but you know the sun's there because there's light even through the clouds. Although we don't see the sun, but we know the sun's there because of the light that comes through the clouds. Similarly, although we don't see the soul or the super soul, we can understand the presence of them by the fact that there is consciousness coming from the soul, and that every soul is being directed by a superior intelligence, giving them remembrance, giving them knowledge, and giving them forgetfulness. So indirectly, we can understand the presence of the soul and the presence of the super soul. And if we're conscious that we're servants of Krishna, then we can always ask Krishna, what does he want us to do in relationship to these other souls? What does he want us to do with his energies in order to please him? And Krishna says, Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam, he's perfectly willing to give us intelligence so that we can improve our devotional service. And our devotional service means also improve our loving relationships with the other devotees. It's much easier to have loving exchanges with devotees than it is with non-devotees. Although great devotees like the 6 Goswamis, Krishna Kirtana Ganana Taraparo, Primamritam Bonidi, Dira Dira Janapriyo Priyakaro, that the 6 Goswamis, they were dear to not only the Dira, the gentlemen, but to also the Adira, the ruffians, because they were Krishna conscious, and therefore, wherever they went, they carried Krishna with them in their hearts, and the whole spiritual world came along with them. Just like Srila Prabhupada was able to effectively spread Krishna consciousness, not only due to his exalted qualities, but also due to the atmosphere he created, the spiritual atmosphere he created by his mere presence. Devotees not only understood that Prabhupada was convinced about Krishna consciousness, but he was also emanating Krishna consciousness and gave others the experience of what it would like to be Krishna conscious. Not to the same extent that Srila Prabhupada was Krishna conscious, but one drop of an ocean of nectar is quite nectarian. And that inspired many devotees to take up to the process and to continue on with it in order to find out to enter into that ocean of nectar. And that's possible by following the instructions of a great devotee like Srila Prabhupada, because that's all the instructions are meant for, to lead one to one's relationship with Krishna. So our business, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Yari Deka Tarikaha Krishna Upadesh Amara Aga Guruhana Taridesh. Whoever we meet, at least we should try to remember that in my relationship with others, it should be based upon service to Krishna. And then pray to Krishna, what would he like me to see? How would he like me to understand things? How would he like me to reciprocate with other persons? What mood he would like me to be in that reciprocation? And of course that varies, that depends upon mercy coming from Krishna. Obviously, if we look at Srila Prabhupada's activities, he reciprocated appropriately with others. When he was walking on the shore in San Francisco with his disciples. For instance, one man came up when Prabhupada was walking with his sannyas disciples, and they were carrying dandas, and one man came up and said, "What are these people carrying these sticks for?" And he asked in such a way as that Prabhupada's reply was, in order to beat off dogs. And then later on, one man came up to Srila Prabhupada with a fish and offered the fish to Srila Prabhupada because he was fishing and he caught one fish. And Prabhupada said, no, 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 you enjoy. And then when Prabhupada continued walking later on, shortly after, he said, and suffer. So Prabhupada did not have he was not sentimental, nor was he over intellectual, but he knew how to reciprocate appropriately with others. If those were submissive, Prabhupada would give them the proper, Krishna conscious understanding. And for those who were antagonistic, Prabhupada would put them in their place. One time, Prabhupada was giving a lecture in Stockholm, in Sweden, and he was explaining about the different orders of life, the Shudras, the Vaishyas, the Kshatriyas, and the Brahmins. Now we know in many parts of the world, people are averse to the idea that there is hierarchy, that there are grades of different living entities within the material world. Everyone would like to claim that equality, although practically speaking, no one is actually equal. But anyhow, they pretend that there's equality. But that equality usually results in impersonalism. I remember one of the first times I was riding on a train in Mumbai, and it was so crowded that there were no seats, and it was a long ride. Finally, there was a seat, and I got the seat. I sat down, and then one man sat on me, because as far as he was concerned, that there was no difference between myself and the seat. So that's called impersonalism. Now, he didn't see any difference, but I felt the difference. So Prabhupada was asked about, Prabhupada was giving a lecture, and then one man asked the question. He said, Swamiji, so what class are you amongst these four classes? I guess you're the first class, right? And Prabhupada said, no, I'm fifth class, because I'm a servant of all the other classes. So Prabhupada explained things as they are, but Prabhupada was always doing it for the welfare of others, not for his own, to glorify or massage his false ego. Therefore, Prabhupada is a lesson, is a good example for all of us, how we should act in such a way as to develop our relation with others, and that relationship has to be in relationship to Krishna. If we think we're going to have a relation with others outside of Krishna consciousness, that relationship will not be very helpful either to the person we have a relationship with or to ourselves. We may imagine that we're doing good for others, but that's always, we know, it's like trying to save the dress of a drowning man. It is true that if a person's drowning in the ocean, one should go in and try and save him. But saving the person who's drowning doesn't mean to pull off his his coat and his pants and swim back to the shore and present the coat and the pants and say, I've saved him. You have to save the person who's in the coat and the pants. That's actually saving him. So to save the outward dress of a person is not really very helpful, is not that helpful as saving the actual soul within the body. So Krishna is telling Arjuna that working devotion will actually make one dear to others. But devotion is based upon the next verse also. In other words, we may try and be devoted, but as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, after going in the 18th chapter, after going through a very 49 verses, actually more than that, 54 verses, 53 verses, leading up to Brahma, Bhuta, Prasanatma, Nishoshiti, Nakangshiti, Samak Sarveshu Bhuteshu, Mad Bhaktim Labhate Param. To be Krishna conscious, there's preliminary work that has to be done. And it can be done indirectly through the process of karma yoga, or jnana yoga, or stanga yoga, or it can be done directly through the process of bhakti yoga. In any case, bhakti yoga and jnana yoga, karma yoga, stanga yoga, they all have the same goal. Although bhakti yoga, one of its goals is Brahman realization, but also it includes Paramatma and Bhagavan realization, where the other processes only go up to the maximum Paramatma realization. Therefore, to become devotional, first we have to become unattached to the material world, free from the anxieties of material existence. Anxieties of material existence come about because of our anxieties over our gross and our subtle material bodies, as well as our relationships with other gross and subtle bodies. So this produces anxiety, and therefore prasanatma does not exist in the material world. It only exists after liberation. Prasanatma means joyfulness, a sense of joyfulness, freedom from distress. And the root cause of distress is hankering and lamentation. We hanker for what we don't have, and we lament over what we lost. So that's the existence, that's material existence forever. Looking forward to the future, a better future, and always getting disappointed that it wasn't the future I thought it was going to be. And in spite of all the advertisement, all the enthusiasm, we never get in the material world exactly what we wanted. And if we get exactly what we wanted, we generally lose it, and therefore we become even more disappointed. It's like the Himalayas, we're going to give birth, and all the animals and all the sages wanted to see what the Himalayas were going to give birth to. So it was enormous rumbling from the Himalaya mountains, and finally the Himalaya mountains gave birth, and a little mouse ran out. As William Shakespeare said, much ado about nothing. So much information about what's going on in the world, how people are eating, how people are sleeping, how people are mating and defending, especially in Kali Yuga, a heavy emphasis on mating and defending. But punas charvita charvananam. it's generally the same thing over and over again. Nothing really new. If we don't read the news today and come back next year, it'll be the same news in a slightly different form. How everyone was eating, how everyone was sleeping, how they were mating, and how are they defending. Especially defense is quite prevalent nowadays because material life means fearfulness. And all you do have to tell someone you're going to die, and immediately they'll do anything to prevent it. As I mentioned before, one devotee went to a doctor. The doctor examined him and said, "My dear sir, I'm sorry to tell you, but I think you're going to die." So the devotee said, "My dear sir, I'm sorry to tell you also, I think you're going to die too." Or as when Srila Prabhupada was asked, as I mentioned before, when it was England, one reporter asked Prabhupada, "Why are so many people dying in India?" So Prabhupada said, "Yes, many people are dying in India. It's a fact. But I've noticed in England also people are dying. As a matter of fact, in India, the death rate is 100%. Everyone dies in India. But also in England, the death rate is no better. It's also 100%. So for all your advancement of technology, industry, still everyone dies anyhow. So what is the credit that you get? You made everything so complicated to prevent death, yet everyone dies anyhow. Therefore, the shoshati nakangshati, when one realizes, gives up hankering, lamentation, and becomes prasanatma, satisfied within oneself, then one realizes Brahmabhuta, that I am Brahman, I'm spirit, I'm not this body, I'm not my mind, I'm not my false ego, nor is anyone else. Therefore, Krishna says in the next verse, Naiva kinchit karomi ti yuktamanyate tattvavet, pashan shrinvan sprishan jagran ashnanga chan svapan svasan, pralapan vishvijan grinan umishan mishanapi, indriyarni arteshu vartanta itidaryan. Person in the divine consciousness, though engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects and that he is aloof from them. A devotee who's absorbed in Krishna consciousness sees like that. He doesn't have to separately strive for Brahman realization. He doesn't have to separately try to understand the difference between himself and the body or the mind. That automatically comes by concentrating on Krishna. Probably compared it to a coconut. In India, there are many coconuts. And if the coconut is not ripe, you shake it, you don't hear anything. But when the coconut is ripe, you shake it, the inner solid part in which the water is contained, you can actually hear it. It falls out and becomes detached from the fibrous part, the external fibrous part. And the inner shell falls out, and you shake it, you can hear the water. So similarly, when we become absorbed in Krishna consciousness and we our consciousness becomes detached from the material external consciousness, then we become aware of the fact that we're actually doing nothing, nor are we entangled. Of course, we're doing something, we're desiring. When we desire in relation to Krishna and service to Krishna, then our consciousness increases. And when we desire in relation to service to our senses and our mind, or to other people's senses and mind, or our false ego, when we desire things in relation to the material world, apart from Krishna, then we become entangled and think ourselves to be part of the material energy. But Krishna is describing in this chapter a self-realized person, how he sees things, and how we should at least theoretically develop a vision so that we won't be so much affected by what's going on in the material world, either in our own personal material experience in our bodies and minds, or with others we have some attachment to, or to the world in general. So Srila Prabhupada was like that. One time, one mother came with her daughter. Her daughter was, I think, around 10 or 11 years old, to Vrindavan, because her daughter had contracted a terminal illness, and it was expected that she would die shortly. So they went to see Srila Prabhupada and have his darshan. And when they had his darshan, the mother was crying, "What should we do? My daughter is going to die." So Prabhupada said, "Well, we're all going to die. It's not a big thing. It's not something new. What you should do is chant Hare Krishna. Become Krishna conscious. Use whatever time left." So Prabhupada was not sentimental. He didn't start crying with these two ladies. He gave them proper advice. In 1986, during a morning walk, Prabhupada had mentioned that he had heard it from an astrologer, that soon there would be a world war. Specifically, he said, this whole civilization, which is meant to keep people in darkness, will soon come to an end with the next war. And he said that war is coming very, very soon. And then he mentioned what the astrologer had said, the specifics of the war, how India and Pakistan would fight with each other, and America would join with Pakistan, and India and Russia would join with India. In any case, it was quite disturbing to the devotees. Most of them were in their 20s, to find out that there would be a world war and their lives would be threatened. It was quite disturbing. So they asked Prabhupada questions. What should we do? Should we go to farms and protect ourselves, or what should we do? So ultimately Prabhupada said, you should chant Hare Krishna. He said, either you die today or you die in 20 years. You're going to die anyhow. But what is the glory in dying in 20 years? The glory is if you chant Hare Krishna at the time of death. That's glorious. So make plans to chant Hare Krishna. Of course, while we're chanting Hare Krishna, it's not that we shouldn't do anything. Well, we should not do anything without chanting Hare Krishna. We can try to protect this body because it's used in Krishna's service, but we can expect that that's up to Krishna what happens. It's not up to our little plans alone. Therefore, Krishna goes on to tell Arjuna, Brahmanyadaya karmani, sangam tyaktva karotiya, lipyate nasapapena, padma patrami vambasa. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. In places where they have lotuses, there's the lotus leaf, which although is near the water and water gets onto the lotus leaf has a waxy substance, so that when the water gets on the leaf, it slides off the leaf. Similarly, one who's within thinking about Krishna, in spite of acting in the material world, because of the higher taste of experiencing the loving relationships between Krishna and his devotees, therefore he's not affected by exactly what's going on in the material world. He's not indifferent to the sufferings of the living entities, but he knows that the only solution to their problems is to become Krishna conscious. If someone is dreaming that a tiger is biting them and calling out in great fear and anxiety and pain that my tiger's eating my leg, so a compassionate person may enter into their dream and try to kick the tiger to save them from the tiger. But a person who has knowledge knows that there's no tiger. The tiger is just, they themselves are souls, and the tiger can't eat the soul. They're not being eaten. It's their body, an imaginary body, that's being eaten. Therefore, instead of trying to kick the tiger, they shake the person to wake them up so they realize that actually there is no tiger. They're not their body. That body that was being eaten wakes them up, tries to wake the person up so they can understand things properly. And therefore, automatically, all their problems will go away. We cannot avoid problems with this body. This body was created to have problems. But we can wake up the soul so the soul realizes that the soul has no real problem. No matter what happens in the material world, the soul has no problem except being forgetful of Krishna. And as soon as the soul becomes conscious of Krishna, all his real problems go away. All his so-called problems go away. And his real existence starts. Therefore, one who concentrates on Krishna will not be affected by the good or bad that's experienced in the material world from the external point of view. And out of compassion, the self-realized person, or those who are aspiring for self-realization, they try to alleviate people of their problems by waking them up to Krishna consciousness. And then Krishna says, Kayena manasa buddhya kevala indriyarapi yogina karma korvanti sangam tyagva mashudaye. The yogis abandoning attachment act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses only for the purpose of purification. So we have a material body, we have to do things, but the more we give up the struggle, or the more we give up our own created struggles, which are generally due to our creating goals for ourselves and others outside of Krishna consciousness. As they used to say in the Hare Krishna movement, if we simply distribute books, then Krishna will send everything else. And now sometimes the devotees say, if we simply get everything else, then we'll be able to distribute books. Similarly, the more goals we create, and the more hard we work to obtain them outside of Krishna consciousness, the more we have to struggle unnecessarily in the material existence. Generally speaking, the purification and artha nivritti means to make our lives more simple. We can't do that immediately or suddenly, but that is the process of purification. The more we utilize our body, mind, intelligence, and senses in the service of Krishna, the more we experience a higher taste, then the more we become attached to hearing and chanting about Krishna. And therefore, things that we thought we could not give up, we naturally give them up. Because compared to becoming conscious of Krishna, they're insignificant. Tuchava. That for that reason, the six Goswamis are glorified. Tyaktva Turnam Ashesha Mandalapati Trenim Sada Tuchavat Utvadina Guneshako Karunaya Gopi Nakanta Shrito Gopi Bharta Rasamrita Dila Hari Kolo Lamogna Nuhu Gopi Kantam Krishna, let's see. Taktva Tornam Ashesha Mandalapati Shainim Sadatu Chavat Udvadina Guneshako Karunaya Gopi Nakanta Shito Gopi Baba Rasamrita Dilahari Kolo Lamogna Moho Bande Rupa Sanatano Raguyago Shri Jiva Gopala Go Tyaktva Turnam Ashesha Mandalapati. The six Goswamis were not ordinary persons. For instance, Raghunath Das Goswami, his father Govardhana Jubdara and Haranyama Jubdara were extremely wealthy. Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, they were ministers in the government of Hussein Shah. They were also fabulously wealthy. But they gave up everything and they went to Vrindavan, where they lived like ordinary mendicants, begging from door to door. But they were so much enriched with the gopis' feelings of separation that they were enjoying pleasure at every moment. But Prabhupada gives the example of C. and Das. C. and Das was a very wealthy lawyer in India during the time when Gandhi was having his non-cooperation movement with the British government. So although Sian Das was earning 50,000 rupees a month, which is like more than 50,000 euros or whatever it is nowadays, dollars, still he was not happy. He was sitting on his balcony one day, and his wife asked Sian Das, he said, "You're so fabulously wealthy, you're so influential, why are you always morose? What do you want to become?" So he pointed to a mendicant on the street. And he said, "I want to become like him." So later on, Gandhi requested that all his followers not cooperate with the British court. And therefore, he was obliged to give up his work as a lawyer in the British court. And he was only getting a few hundred rupees a month as maintenance from Gandhi's movement. So now he actually had become a mendicant. But he could not bear that lifestyle because he had no higher taste. And therefore, within a short period of time, he left his body out of depression. On the other hand, the six Goswamis, like Raghunath Das Goswami, they're able to reduce their eating to practically nothing. And yet they were always ecstatic. Of course, it is said that Raghunath Das Goswami was living in the spiritual world also, in his spiritual body. And every day he had 3 sumptuous feasts of prasadam in his spiritual body. But at least externally, it appeared that he was skinny and frail and suffering from ill health. But it didn't bother him at all, because he didn't exist in the material world. He exists in his spiritual body in the spiritual world, in spiritual consciousness. Therefore, because they had the proper mood of devotion to Krishna, they were able to give up their attachment to unnecessary material things. Of course, we can't imitate the 6 Goswamis successfully, but at least we can appreciate that that's the path of success that we could gradually take by including more Krishna consciousness in our lives and naturally giving up some of the things that are really unnecessary. Therefore, in the next verse, it is said, Sankhya Purvaka Nama Gana Natibi Kolola Sankritito Nidrahara Viharakadi Vidito Sankhyan Kitino Chayo Radha Krishna Smrinasvitera Madhurima Nandena Samohito Vande Rupa Sanatano Raghuyago Shijiva Gopalago. So how did the 6 Goswamis, at least what example do they set for us to follow? They chanted their Hare Krishna mantra a number of rounds every day. Maybe we don't have time to chant 198 rounds like Haridas Thakur, or 64, even 64 rounds, like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada suggested. Prabhupada asked us to at least chant 16 rounds and to try to do it offenselessly. And they bow down schedule measurement. So we should also pay obeisances regularly, seeing the deities or seeing the devotees. And they worshipped Radha and Krishna or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They worship Krishna. In that way, they were able to gradually make progress, because they were Nitya Siddha devotees for the most part. But anyhow, they showed us the process, the path of progress in spiritual life, so that one day we can become detached from material existence and absorbed in love of Krishna within our hearts. And it's not difficult. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's made it as simple as possible. He's not trying to overly complicated things. He asked us to chant Hare Krishna, or as Lord Nityananda, when he was going door to door, he told everyone, himself and Haridas Thakur, basically 3 things: Bolo Krishna, Bhaja Krishna, Koro Krishna Shika. He'd knock on the door, and when the householder would come, he'd tell them, my dear sir, Bolo Krishna, Bhaja Krishna, Koro Krishna Shika. Chant Hare Krishna, worship Krishna, and follow Krishna's instructions. Of course, some of them accepted and became pure devotees, and others thought, these are 2 thieves. They're simply coming here to look and see what I have in my house, giving me these nonsense instructions. And therefore they said, go away, we'll call the police. So that's what we should do also. Tell people, Bolo Krishna, Bhaja Krishna, Koro Krishna Shika. And we should also follow the advice of Lord Nityananda and Haridas Thakur, because it's coming from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And that way our lives will become, in the real sense, successful in Krishna consciousness. So I'll stop here for now. Are there any questions or comments?
Maharaj, I would like to ask generally if there is a rule how we should speak to Krishna, like if we want to pray to him, or like it says that we should make friends with him, and we want to pray to him in a like speaking just simple words, but what's the best way to do it without offending him?
Well, there are 18,000 verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and many of them, whether by Prahlad Maharaj or Narada Muni or Lord Brahma or Lord Shiva, or the four Kamaras or Prithu Maharaj or Akrura, they're full. Every chapter, practically speaking, is full of prayers. So choose one of those prayers and pray, following the footsteps with these great devotees, because their prayers were effective and they were done in full knowledge. While our prayers may not be so effective, may not be in full consciousness and full knowledge. Therefore, we may ask for things which are later on we may regret, like Dhruva Maharaj. He wanted the kingdom greater than that of his great-grandfather, and later on he regretted such a desire. So we should follow in the footsteps of the great devotees, and we've been given so many great prayers in these books, and we should see which prayer we think is suitable and pray that prayer to help us become conscious of Krishna. But to ask Krishna for material things is maybe necessary sometimes. If we are walking the forest and we step on a tiger trap and our foot gets caught, we may politely ask Krishna to help us, maybe send someone. But rather than just praying, please, Krishna, send someone, we should also chant Hare Krishna. Otherwise, so if no one comes and we're thinking of a tiger and the tiger trap, it would not be very auspicious. Now, Dhruva Maharaj, when he was leaving his body to go to Dhruva Loka, pole star, a Vaikuntha airplane came, and before Dhruva Maharaj got onto the airplane, Death Personified came and offered obeisances to Dhruva Maharaj. And Dhruva Maharaj climbed on the back of Death Personified in order to enter into the Vaikuntha airplane. But when he saw the Vaikuntha Dudi, the Vishnu Dudas, were bringing him to Dhruva Loka, he was so ecstatic he didn't know what to say. So therefore he just said, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So if we don't know what to pray, we can always pray that prayer. Oh, the energy of the Supreme Lord, oh, the Supreme Lord, kindly engage me in loving service. That's a perfect prayer. Even Radha and Krishna, they sometimes sing that prayer too. That Srimati Radharani wants to engage in Krishna's service, and Krishna wants to engage in Srimati Radharani's service. Anything else? Okay, we can stop here. We'll see you soon. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Swami Veda Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Gaur
Jai.
Premanande, Hari Bol.
Hari Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.